focus our efforts on Latin America, Central America specifically here. I want to put this tweet up from the New York Post with the headline, Trump is 100% serious about acquiring Greenland and the Panama Canal, say sources close to President-elect Trump here. Well, over the weekend, this is why we're talking about this, President-elect Trump put on Truth Social this. I'm going to read it. He says, the United States has a vested interest in the secure, efficient, and reliable operation of the Panama Canal, and that was always understood. We would and will never let it fall into the wrong hands. It was not given for the benefit of others, but merely as a token of cooperation with us in Panama. If the principles, both moral and legal, of this magnanimous gesture of giving are not followed, then we will demand the Panama Canal be returned to us in full and without question. To the officials of Panama, please be guided accordingly here. So we want to talk about this with our colleague there and friend, national security analyst and expert, and retired Marine intelligence officer Hal Kempfer, who knows a thing or two about this part of the world. He joins me. Hal, good to see you here. Where do you think this came from? Are there external factors at play that Trump is highlighting and alluding to? What's the subtext here?
Well, Andrew, the subtext is there are issues with Panama, with the Panama Canal. You know, a lot of it's environmental. They haven't got enough rainfall down there, so they had to slow down the transit through because they just have enough fresh water. Even with some of the new systems, it was still using more fresh water than they had available to keep up the sustained rate. And you know how it is. When you have a lot of demand, well, and limited supply, price goes up. However, with that said, we do have a treaty. We have the treaty with Panama over the Panama Canal. It used to be sovereign U.S. territory. I was stationed in Panama in the 90s when it was U.S. territory. I did a big project in the Panama Canal Zone when it was U.S. territory. So there is a bit of history there. The history, of course, goes back to Teddy Roosevelt and literally the start of Panama as a country when it broke away from Colombia, which the U.S. had a hand in, and then of course building the canal. So there's a lot of history there. It's difficult to see how we would structurally be able to take it back. That would be a tough one. You know, we did go into Panama in '89 to take out Noriega, so there is some history of us doing that. But we're not in the same situation today. And it's really interesting because the president, Jose Molino, he's very pro-American. He's very pro-democracy. He graduated from Tulane Law School. He was anti-Noriega, anti-authoritarianism. You know, his specialty is maritime law. You can't get much more tuned in on the canal issues than his legal background. And I'm sure he's kind of scratching his head because he's actually been working with us very closely on immigration issues and has been a very cooperative partner. But this does bring up an issue, and it's been brought up before, that there's huge Chinese influence that's gone in there. And I think some of this is that President-elect Trump is trying to do something to counter that Chinese influence, not just in Panama. I think he's sending a signal to all of Latin America because there's other places where China is basically making inroads, if you will.
Yeah, so the Panamanian president, his name Jose Raul Molino, he said yesterday in a video statement posted on X, quote, every square meter of the Panama Canal and its adjacent zones is part of Panama, and it will continue to be. But Hal, does Trump have a point? We did this during the Carter administration as a gesture of goodwill to our Panamanian allies. Can you give back a gesture of goodwill?
You know, that's kind of it's interesting. I'm sure someone could make a legal argument that there's a failure to basically uphold the spirit of the agreement or something like that. I don't know if there's anything in the agreement that stipulates that we have to get a favored status in terms of shipping our ships through there. One thing I would point out, though, is we don't have a very large merchant marine for the size of our country. It's always been very small, and a lot of ships are under flags of convenience. Interestingly, a lot of those flags are under countries that we kind of protect. In fact, one of the biggest flag of convenience countries is Panama itself. And so We ship a lot of things through it. I think what we're really looking at is our strategic naval interests in being able to move naval assets from the Atlantic to the Pacific and back and forth.
Okay.
I think we'd probably like to see a lower fare for that because we do kind of underwrite Panama's national security. And I think we're reminding Panama of that situation.
Do you think Trump is coming at this more from a economic perspective or kind of a military strategic perspective, or both?
I think a little bit of both. I think he's looking at the economics. I think he's always one that's looking to make a deal. I think this is putting pressure on Panama to come to some sort of new arrangement, if you will, with the United States on pricing. But I also think he's looking at how the U.S. bolsters Panama, how the U.S. bolsters and underwrites the security, so to speak, of a number of countries, particularly a number of countries within the Western Hemisphere. And I think he's a little frustrated. He's probably more than a little frustrated with the amount of Chinese influence, Chinese investment, Chinese control that he's seen down there, which really goes back to an agreement that they have in 2017, where China actually has rather an overextended amount of control over what's going on with the canal issues. And I think he just wants to completely turn that situation around.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to answer my own question, but it seems like this is, Trump being Trump, using the kind of quote unquote rip-off motif in this context, much like he has done with the NATO alliance and our NATO allies, Hal. In this post, he says the fees being charged by Panama are ridiculous, especially knowing the extraordinary generosity that has been bestowed to Panama by the U.S. He says this complete rip-off of our country will immediately stop. He called this a foolish giveaway by then President Jimmy Carter, and he kind of went on and on there, kind of excoriating this whole arrangement, this whole setup here. How vital is the canal to the United States as it stands right now in 2024? I know we built it and then we gave it away to Panama, but how vital is it now?
Well, it's still a critical waterway. I mean, we can't send carriers through it or something, but we send a lot of naval combatants through it. A lot of our ships go through the canal. They're within Panamax standards, so they can. In fact, a number of our ships are actually built to Panamax standards to make sure that we can move them from the Atlantic to the Pacific quickly. So it is a vital waterway. Obviously, this clog that's taking place in terms of being to do a Panama crossing because of the lack of fresh water has been a real problem, not just for the United States, but for every country involved with shipping or with navies. They got to move from ocean to ocean. So that's been a problem. And of course, the fees are rather high, but there's a reason for that. There are some basic economics. So,
but does every country pay the same fee, Hal, or does the United States get charged disproportionately?
As far as I know, everyone's paying the same fee. And it sounds to me like he may want a little bit of preference in terms of that. Although I'm kind of curious if maybe there's something he's looking at where maybe Chinese ships are paying a lower fee. And I don't rule that out. I haven't seen anything. But sometimes when you get into the economics of this and how the money moves, you discover things that aren't readily apparent. So I can't tell you I could see it, but I can't rule anything out. And certainly that has been a huge problem for literally going back, into the mid-teens, was that China was trying to get more and more influence in Panama. And that's been a frustration for the U.S. strategically, through multiple presidents, is watching this Chinese incursion. And I think what he's done is he has his own rhetorical way of kind of putting these things out. But I think what he's trying to do is turn that around and restore U.S. influence in the Western Hemisphere. And I think part of that, too, is I'm not saying he's reasserting the Monroe Doctrine per se, but I think he is looking out for our strategic interests, particularly our strategic naval interests, in what is really one of the three most critical waterways in the world.
Yeah, I mean, Hal, just finally on this, do we even know what mechanism Trump could use to do it or not?
I have no idea.
Okay.
In fact, I think President Molino tonight is looking through the treaty and talking some other, trying to figure out what exactly is he talking about. I don't remember a snack snapback clause or something in the treaty where we could go in and reassert it, and actually it would be pretty much impossible. I mean theoretically it's possible, but it'd be very difficult to pull that off. But it is fascinating to hear that, and then of course they hear it in the same breath of, and while we're at it, why don't we get Greenland at the same time?
Yeah.
Which I'm sure in Denmark is causing a bit of disdain, if you know what I mean. So.
Hal, this is all happening at the very same time. There was a report on Friday night in the Financial Times about, some type of request by the Trump-Vance transition team for NATO allies to boost their GDP spending not to 2% of their GDP, but to 5% of their GDP as some kind of protection clause for the alliance there. The report said as much, that some of the allies were open to that, which I thought was interesting. And then we had over the weekend China responding to the latest sale by the United States to Taiwan of more military assets and material. And then this with Panama and Greenland. And so you and I talk so often about a very restive, active, conflicting world. Will this be quieter come January 20th or not?
I don't know. I think it's going to be a little noisy for a while.
Okay.
And frankly, he's a president-elect, and he's got the bully pulpit, shall we say, and he's throwing out a lot of things that he can always pull back from. One of the things that's interesting is with the way that President Trump negotiates, is he throws these things out, and then he works back to an agreement. And there are other presidents that just don't do that. President Biden didn't do that. President Obama was famous for kind of going in with, like, here's our best deal. And it really was the best deal that he could put forward. And of course, he got a little reputation where other countries would push back, and we had to pull back from our best deal. And Trump, he's what can I say? He's a businessman.
Yeah.
And he throws something out there a little bit, probably further than where he thinks he'll end up landing. But that's the way he does things. And 5% is a very interesting number. If you look at the amount that Europe needs to invest, NATO and even the European Union, into their member states, it actually gets much higher than 2%. In fact, right now with Ukraine, the thought is, well, we could put European peacekeepers on the ground. That's been a big discussion of where they could go. There's a basic math problem. It's not clear if all the European countries working together can even put 20,000 peacekeepers on the ground in Ukraine. And that's how bad it is in terms of how they've underinvested in their military, not their military industrial complex, but their military per se.
I see. Hal, just lastly, back to the Panama Canal. Do you have an opinion on this? Do you think it should be back under United States control? Do you think we should be stewards of the Panama Canal or no? Or are you ambivalent?
Well, we had a treaty. We gave it back to them. Certainly the Panamanians feel it's sovereign territory. I can't imagine us trying to do something without ending up in a war with Panama. And Panama, if you go down there, it is really, and certainly since Noriega, we basically built their government. We basically helped build their military complex or military, which isn't a robust military. And part of that's based on the fact that the U.S. kind of, backs them up if there's ever a military crisis down there. So it would be very strange to have the United States step in and do this. But I think that Panama is going to have to make a decision, which is, they kind of got pulled in to the a lot of agreements and a lot of arrangements with China. And now they're getting pushback from the United States, and they're going to have to make a decision on which way they want to go. And if they push back against the United States, I imagine, short of military action, I imagine there's a lot of things that we could do to make it very difficult for Panama to stay that course.
Okay, Hal Kempfer, we'll leave it at that. Hal, thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.